In the shadowy corners of the world's most dangerous streets, a name once whispered with a mix of fear and reverence now echoes as a cautionary tale. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's life story reads like a dark novel, where ambition and ruthlessness climb a ladder stained with betrayal and blood. But how did a boy from a dusty village become the mastermind of a criminal empire? What turns the tide of fate from poverty to power, and at what cost? Let's delve into a life so dramatic and fraught with peril that it will leave you utterly speechless. And can one man's journey from rags to narco riches and back to a prison jumpsuit reveal the price of a life spent in the shadows? Let's find out. Early life and rise to power. In the rugged heartland of Sinaloa, Mexico, a boy named Joaquin Guzman was born into a world where the line between right and wrong was as blurred as the dusty trails leading out of his tiny village, La Tuna. The year was somewhere between 1954 and 1957. The exact date remains unknown. Nevertheless, what is known is the fact that El Chapo, which means shorty in Spanish, would soon cast a shadow over the world that would conflict with the very diminutive stature. El Chapo's childhood was far from the innocence typically associated with youth. His family was poor, scraping a living from the unforgiving soil as subsistence farmers. His father, a man who found solace in the bottle more often than in providing for his family, was also involved in the local drug trade, a fact that would pivotally steer the course of young Joaquin's life. The family's homestead was a place where violence was as common as the corn that struggled to grow in the fields. The abuse at the hands of his father was relentless, and it wasn't long before El Chapo, barely in his teens, was forced to fend for himself. He dropped out of school, his education truncated in 3rd grade, and he set out to make his own way in the world. Life in the mountains of Sinaloa was harsh, and options were limited. The lure of the drug trade, which promised wealth beyond the wildest dreams of local farmers, was irresistible. He started with small-time drug dealing, a trade he was introduced to by his father. But unlike his old man, El Chapo had a head for business and a knack for leadership. He was a natural, and it wasn't long before he caught the eye of the local drug lords. His ascent in the world of drug trafficking was as rapid as it was ruthless. El Chapo had a vision, and he pursued it with a relentless drive. He joined the Guadalajara cartel, quickly rising through the ranks due to his cunning and strategic mind. But it was his leadership of the Sinaloa cartel that would cement his infamy. Under his command, the cartel grew into a behemoth, its tentacles reaching far beyond the borders of Mexico. The tactics employed by El Chapo were brutal, a necessary evil, he believed, to maintain order in the chaos of the drug trade. He was both revered and feared by his men. His name was whispered in the same breath as the legends of old. He demanded loyalty and rewarded it handsomely, but betrayal was met with a swift and merciless end. His rule was ironclad, his decisions final. Yet, despite the violence that surrounded him, El Chapo was also known for his moments of generosity, particularly to the people of his hometown. This duality only added to his mystique, painting him as a Robin. Notorious rivals and fears. In the shadowy world of drug trafficking, allegiances are as fragile as glass, and betrayals are as common as the rising sun. For Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, yet he needed allies to build his empire. The Flores twins, Margarito and Pedro, were among those he counted on. Born in the same harsh world that forged El Chapo, the twins knew the language of the streets and the weight of a promise. They climbed the ranks, becoming key players in the Sinaloa cartel's operations in Chicago. However, the world of narcotics is as fickle as it is cruel. When the twins found themselves cornered by law enforcement, they faced a stark choice: life in prison or cooperation. The decision to turn informants sent shockwaves through the cartel's ranks. The betrayal was not just a business setback for El Chapo, it was a personal affront, a stab in the back from those he had once considered part of his inner circle. The twins' cooperation with the authorities led to a trove of information that would eventually contribute to El Chapo's downfall. Their testimonies and the evidence they provided were instrumental in painting a detailed picture of the Sinaloa cartel's operations, directly leading to the capture of one of the most elusive drug lords in history. While the Flores twins' betrayal was a significant blow, it was the rivalry with Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho, that posed a constant threat to El Chapo's dominance. El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, emerged as a disciplined and formidable adversary. Unlike El Chapo, who occasionally indulged in the limelight, El Mencho operated with a calculated discretion that made him all the more dangerous. The CJNG, under his command, was ruthless and ambitious, expanding rapidly and violently across Mexico, Mexico and challenging the Sinaloa cartel's supremacy. The rivalry between El Chapo and El Mencho was marked by a series of brutal confrontations, as both cartels vied for control of lucrative drug trafficking routes. The bloodshed and violence that ensued were a testament to the lengths these men would go to protect their empires. As the violence escalated, however, the Mexican government and its allies watched closely, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The chaos of the drug war, with its ever-changing alliances and betrayals, provided the perfect cover for law enforcement to infiltrate and dismantle the networks that El Chapo had spent decades building. Downfall and capture. The kidnapping of El Chapo's son, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, by a rival cartel was a stark demonstration of the shifting power dynamics within the Mexican drug trafficking world. The audacious abduction from an upscale restaurant was a clear message to the Sinaloa cartel: no one was untouchable. The incident sent shockwaves through the organization, igniting fears and suspicions that would lead to internal fractures. Then came Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's arrest and extradition to the United States, marking yet another significant milestone in the long-standing battle against drug trafficking. His capture was the culmination of a meticulous and coordinated effort by Mexican and American law enforcement agencies. El Chapo was known for his slippery escapes, having evaded authorities twice before from high-security prisons. However, his luck ran out on January 8, 2016, when Mexican Marines captured him in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, after a shootout. Following his arrest, El Chapo was returned to the same prison he had escaped from 6 months earlier. The Mexican government, recognizing the challenges of keeping him incarcerated and the potential for another escape, began proceedings for his extradition to the United States, where he faced multiple drug trafficking and organized crime charges. The legal process was fraught with delays and appeals by El Chapo's lawyers, but ultimately, on January 19, 2017, the Mexican Supreme Court dismissed his appeals, and he was extradited to face justice in the US. He landed in New York and was arraigned on a 17-count indictment, including charges of leading a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, and firearms violations. El Chapo's trial in the United States was a media spectacle, with testimonies revealing the inner workings of the Sinaloa cartel's operations, including bribery, assassinations, and the cartel's expansive drug distribution network. On February 12, 2019, after a 3-month trial, he was found guilty on all counts and later sentenced to life imprisonment, plus 30 years, and ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion in assets. After El Chapo's extradition to the United States, the Sinaloa cartel faced a power vacuum that threatened its very foundation. The cohesion that had once been its strength began to unravel as factions within the cartel jostled for control. The unity that El Chapo had enforced was dissipating, and the resulting strife was not just about who would take the reins, but how the cartel would navigate its future amidst the ever-increasing pressure from law enforcement and rival cartels. Amidst this chaos, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, a co-founder of the cartel, emerged as a stabilizing force. His experience and relatively low profile, compared to the flamboyant El Chapo, allowed him to consolidate power and keep the cartel's operations running. However, the true test of his leadership was in managing the ambitions of El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos. The Guzman children, with their lineage and their own ideas for the cartel's direction, represented both an opportunity and a challenge for El Mayo. The Guzman siblings, particularly Ivan Archivaldo Guzman and Jesus Alfredo Guzman, were eager to leave their mark and prove their worth. Their aggressive stance and willingness to engage in open conflict with rivals signaled a new, more volatile era for the Sinaloa cartel. Their actions, often impulsive and brazen, stood in contrast to El Mayo's more calculated approach. Legacy and impact on society. All in all, El Chapo's rise and fall did not happen in isolation. It was part of a larger narrative, one that involved governments, law enforcement, and communities caught in the crossfire. The war on drugs, particularly in Mexico, has been a battle with a high cost. Towns and cities have been turned into battlegrounds, with civilians often bearing the brunt of the violence. The echoes of this struggle are seen in the mourning of families, the displacement of communities, and the ever-present fear that grips areas hardest hit by cartel violence. The Sinaloa cartel, under El Chapo's leadership, was a driving force in this war. The cartel's operations led to an influx of illegal substances into neighborhoods around the world, fueling addiction and the myriad social problems that come with it. The criminal justice systems have been overwhelmed, prisons filled to the brim with those caught in the gears of the drug machine, many of whom are minor players, their lives forever altered by harsh sentences. Despite his incarceration, the shadow of El Chapo looms large. The power vacuum left in his wake has not led to peace, but has instead sparked further conflicts as new leaders emerge and rival cartels cartels vie for supremacy. The violence has not abated, it has morphed, sometimes becoming even more brutal as the rules of engagement are rewritten by those seeking to make their mark. The societal impact of El Chapo's criminal activities extends beyond the immediate violence. Economies have been distorted, with illicit funds permeating legitimate businesses, corrupting institutions, and undermining trust in government. The allure of the wealth and power that comes with the drug trade continues to tempt the youth, drawing them into a life of crime, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and violence. Yet, amidst the darkness of El Chapo's legacy, there are slivers of light. Communities have rallied, activists have risen, and voices have been raised in protest against the conditions that allow such figures to thrive. The conversation about drug legalization, harm reduction, and rehabilitation has gained momentum, challenging long-held beliefs about the best way to combat the scourge of drugs. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and sharing so we can keep bringing more content like this. See you next time.